I took my first Norwegian cruise on the Norwegian Encore to Alaska in late April and early May. I have another video on the Alaska experience on 4 different cruise lines that you can check out in the description below if you're interested in that. This video is mostly about the ship experience as well as Alaskan port logistics for Norwegian cruises. The reason for taking this cruise was to celebrate a birthday, and I live in the Seattle area, so I didn't have to take a plane ride to get to the port. Also, Alaska is a little less expensive when not in peak summer. So what did I think of my first Norwegian cruise? I liked it. I do think each cruise line, and ship for that matter, has strengths and weaknesses, so I'll go through each general area and give my commentary. Embarkation in Seattle went smoothly. We did get a very early check-in time, and we knew that it was so early that we would have to wait to board. We did get through security and check-in in about 25 minutes. Then we had almost an hour wait before they let us on board. Those in the Haven did board first, but when it got to general boarding, it did go pretty quickly. Now that we're on board, let's start with the cabins. Norwegian Encore went into service in late 2019, so the cabins are still pretty fresh. I was happy with the balcony cabin that I got. The colors were aesthetically pleasing, and the cabin was well laid out. The bathrooms seemed to have a little more room than the last ship I was on, which wasn't Norwegian. And of course, I liked the glass shower door instead of a shower curtain. There was a USB plug by the bed, so you can charge your phone next to you when in bed and still have access to it. Even the hallway looked nice, and I felt like I was walking down a hotel hallway. One thing I'm going to note is that I bidded on a cabin upgrade a couple months before the cruise. I was sent an email that I had been outbid about a month later. I was completely fine with that, and I thought it was done. But then 2 days before the cruise, I received an email that my bid was accepted and got a new cabin. Got that balcony cabin. So keep in mind that even if you receive notice that you are outbid, your bid is still out there unless you cancel it. This ship, and likely other Norwegian ships, had many smaller venues like specialty restaurants, bars, and even a comedy club throughout the ship. It did spread the crowds for the most part. It does have a good-sized main theater. What I noticed is that it uses its atrium for activities, mainly trivia, throughout the day, and interactive activities at night. This is also where guest services, the excursion desk, the internet help desk, a bar, and the cruise next desk are. Basically, there's a lot going on in this area, and that then add in trivia and other activities that require microphones. Above this area is the local, which is a complimentary dining venue that looks down on the atrium and is often busy as well. The atrium does have seating, but it's a lot of bigger chairs and love seats that take up a lot of space. So if it's an evening event, there is often limited seating available, and because activities happen back to back, it's constant musical chairs. On top of all that, people walk by to get to the theater and the elevators. I found that I didn't like this area as a venue for activities because it was so congested and noisy and hard to find a seat. I would have preferred a medium-sized, more contained venue to have trivia and similar activities, but there just wasn't one. I actually love the Galaxy Pavilion on Deck 17 that has a collection of simulators that you can pay for. It was a medium-sized venue that I didn't see used much at all. I would have loved this turned into a venue that hosted trivia and activities and could have its own bar with its nice aft views. The waterfront is Norwegian Encore's promenade on Deck 8. There are seating areas where you can sit and talk with others. Many of the specialty restaurants have outside seating here, and there is convenient access to outside bars. It does go all the way around in the back or aft of the ship. However, it doesn't go all the way around on the forward side. But still, it's a lovely setup to walk or sit and enjoy the view. It really does set the tone to mingle outside with a drink. The only reason there wasn't a lot of mingling outside on this cruise was because how cold and wet it was. On deck 7, there is also outside access for passengers. Most of the view is obstructed by lifeboats, but you can stretch your legs here. The actual track is on the top deck. If you're serious about walking or jogging, you might be disappointed. It's a very small track, and it shares the deck with people trying to get to the hot tubs and other parts of the ship, meaning people will be in your way. I could see the joggers getting frustrated with passerbys even on this very cold cruise where very few people were outside. If you do want to walk or jog, you might have a better experience outside on deck 7 or on deck 8 before the bars and restaurants open than you would on the top deck. And that leads me to the fitness center. It felt very small for a ship this size. I did go on the second day of the cruise, and it was frustrating to find available fitness equipment because all the machines were being used. I imagine the crowds would lessen as the cruise went on, but I didn't go back after my first experience was so frustrating. The observation lounge is on deck 15 at the front of the ship. This is a great place to sit and relax on comfy couches during the day and listen to music at night. If you want a late breakfast or an afternoon snack, you'll find an assortment of food here. Because the weather was so bad on this cruise, everyone tended to flock here when it wasn't meal times, like dinner, especially on sea days. I didn't even try to find a seat on Glacier Bay Day. I knew it would be packed. On a recent dry dock, they took out a chunk of the port side of the observation lounge and put in cabins, so this likely contributes to it feeling crowded. One thing I noticed about the observation lounge is that it tends to be warmer than the rest of the ship. Makes sense because heat rises and there's usually a lot of people there. If you run cold, you might like that. I tend to run hot, so I was uncomfortably warm even when wearing a t-shirt in the observation lounge. But again, I run hot. One thing that is unique about Norwegian, or at least this ship, is that you are basically forced to walk through the casino to get places. This forced most of the casino to be non-smoking, which actually got me to almost play slots since it was so pleasant there. I love people watching and quite like that I could people watch while they're playing craps without dealing with the smoke. There was a small sectioned off area of the casino for smokers, and I really like this reversal of the typical experience that it caters to smokers. The Norwegian Encore does have some unique experiences. I was excited to try the go-karts, which is a $15 per person charge for each round. But it was rarely open, and when it was so cold that I wasn't eager to do it. I think this would be a better experience in the Caribbean. Same goes for the water slides. I totally would have done them if it hadn't been 40 degrees. The simulator ride in the Galaxy Pavilion did seem interesting, but were a little more pricey than I wanted to pay for the time that you spent doing them. I did have some onboard credit, and I liked how I used it on the thermal spa and escape room. The thermal spa on this ship is great. I didn't want to pay for a week-long pass, and they didn't have day passes. One night they had a ladies' night, which was $59 plus gratuity for 3 hours. One of those hours was similar to a pamper party where they tried to sell you body sculpting treatments, and I just wanted to use the thermal spa. I did see the next day they had a thermal spa night for 3 hours, and you probably didn't have to sit through the pamper party on that night, and you'd have an extra hour in the spa. I had a great time on the heated loungers in the thermal spa and loved trying out the sauna and the pools. The salt room didn't do anything for me, and I wasn't interested in the snow room. After all, I was in Alaska. I do wonder how I would have used this ship differently if the weather was hot. With the rest of the onboard credit, we did the escape room. It felt like a bargain at $19 per person. The escape room has a nautical theme. Some of the aspects were a little glitchy, but the person running it was cognizant of time and wanted the players to succeed. I've heard two big complaints about Norwegian over the years. One, that they nickel and dime you to death. I honestly didn't feel that way, but maybe that's because I researched what all the extra possible charges would be and went into it with a plan. I had expected to use the onboard credit for the go-karts and maybe a day pass at the thermal spa if it was offered. And I did pivot to the escape room instead once I realized the cold and wind would make the go-karts unpleasant. I did end up going to that thermal spa, even though it wasn't for as long as I wanted. The other big complaint I heard was that you feel less than if you're not in the haven. I didn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like you're missing out on access to parts of the ship if you're not haven. You are, in actuality, missing out on some parts, but the haven is tucked away enough that you don't feel it. There is a pay portion of this ship called the Vibe, with nicer lounge chairs, and they limit the number of people who can be there. I peeked into this section of the ship that is on the top deck, and I couldn't see anyone there on this very cold cruise. This would be likely much more used if the weather had been better. Spice H2O recently replaced the laser tag. This is a free adults-only area with loungers and its own bar. There is no H2O or water yet, as I believe there is a soot issue. The hot tubs aren't usable, and there's an empty waiting pool right now. This is a great lounging area and will be a nice area to soak once they fix the soot issue. But honestly, it didn't affect my experience on this cruise because my recurring theme, it was too cold to enjoy these amenities on the cruise I took. As I've said before, the weather wasn't great on this cruise. I usually walk a lot on the top decks during cruises, but this cruise was the exception. There was only a few hours window where the sun was out during the whole week, and even then it was super cold. If you had the fortitude to be out on the top decks, then you would have had most of the top deck to yourself. I know this would have been a completely different experience in warmer weather. There were a lot of bars around the ship. I really liked the smaller venues, mostly on deck 8, that had some custom drinks. I had two favorite venues. The District had great sea views and good lighting for being an inside venue. If you love beer, you'll love it here. Beer isn't really my style, but often it was a nice quiet place to play cards or read during the day and watch the sea go by. They also had some cool chairs. My other favorite bar is the Sugarcane Mojito Bar. This has a relatively small drink menu, but excellent fruity mojitos. The outside version of this bar serves an environmentally sustainable drink of the day, which was fun to try. We did have the More at Sea package with this cruise, and while I don't usually drink while at home, I love trying new drinks on cruises. Overall, I was a bit disappointed in the overall drink selection on this cruise, even including the special bar drink menus. It felt more narrow than other cruise lines. I did find a Norwegian drink menu online from a couple years ago that I referred to in ordering, and a couple of times they said they didn't serve that drink anymore. However, if you stick to the more basic drinks, you'll be satisfied. Also, you can order 2 drinks at a time, which is helpful if the bars are busy. Let's talk about my favorite subject, food. The main dining room, the Manhattan, is on the aft of the ship on deck 7. It's a tall dining room taking up 2 decks. It is only available for dinner, and it opened for dinner half an hour earlier than the two smaller dining rooms, Taste and Savor. You don't need reservations for any of the main dining rooms. Just walk up. Keep in mind that they load the dining rooms from the best window seats. So if you want the best view in the Manhattan, which is in the very aft, get there early, about 10 minutes before the dining room opens. Service was uniformly good in all dining rooms, with one exception that I'll talk about soon. The food was pretty good. One item was consistently perfect in every venue we tried. And believe me, we tried all the venues. And that was their cheeseburger. The fries were okay, but the cheeseburger was really excellent. There were a few misses from the menu, most notably the cannoli, but that's likely because I had real cannolis on the East Coast about a year ago. I was surprised that I didn't see more seafood like salmon or even a baked Alaska on the dessert menu. Most cruise lines typically have one lobster night, and there wasn't one on this ship. But other than that, the food was good, and I think most people can find things to try for the included meals in the dining rooms. What I really love about Norwegian is the casual dress code. Pretty much anything goes in the main dining room in most specialty restaurants. I don't need a formal night, and I love that I could bring jeans and leggings and didn't need to bring a dress or skirt. Taste and Savor are the two smaller dining rooms. One is on the port side and one is on the starboard side, and the mixed bar is in the middle. These dining rooms are open for breakfast and lunch for about an hour and a half each. Our worst dining experience was in Savor. I couldn't pinpoint what was going on, but it took forever, and it seemed like everyone forgot about us. There were 3 or 4 small tables all in a row, and none of us got our drinks until after the main entree. It took almost 2 hours for lunch, and the people next to us gave up before dessert. The other tables didn't seem to have that problem, but for the rest of the cruise, we just decided to stick to the Taste dining room for breakfast and lunch, and that worked out great for food and service. The problem with Taste and Savor for breakfast and lunch is that they aren't large venues. If we didn't get there when they just opened, you had to wait sometimes 45 minutes to get a table. The reason is that they will seat everyone in line when the dining room opens, and all the tables are full until the passengers start finishing their meals. I also think the short hours that they're open contribute to the problem. What's great is that the Local is a complimentary dining venue, and it's open almost 24 hours a day. They don't have a huge menu, but they likely have something you'll like for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or if you just want a snack. Other than the 2 times we wanted a snack, we were forced to go to the Local if we got to the dining room not exactly at opening time for either breakfast or lunch, and we're told it would be a 45-minute wait. So we hightailed it to the Local and had a quicker breakfast. It is a louder venue, keep that in mind, since it overlooks the atrium where there are activities going on all day, and it's adjacent to the casino. But we like the food. Near the elevators, you'll see that you can use the touchscreen menu to see how at capacity each of the dining rooms and the Local is. It took me a few days to figure out it was there. It was handy to refer to if you're trying to figure out where you can get in quickly to eat. The American Diner is on the top deck on the aft of the ship near the go-karts. And I urge you to stop by this complimentary dining venue. It has a 1950s diner decor. I could find things on the menu that weren't offered anywhere else on the ship. In particular, I was wanting to try out the white bean chicken chili. It ended up being just okay, but the vibe there was worth it. It's a great place to pick up a cheeseburger because you can't get more American than that. It's only open for lunch and not open every day. Every time I stopped by, it wasn't that busy, so do check it out for lunch. While I walked by the specialty restaurants, I didn't try any of them on this cruise. I do like to really explore the included food options on my first cruise with a new-to-me cruise line. Cagney's has a great reputation as a steakhouse. Food Republic centers on Asian fusion and was a very bright contrast to Cagney's dark atmosphere. Le Bistro is the fanciest specialty restaurant on Norwegian Encore, if you judge a restaurant just based on its dress code. I must admit that Onda, the Italian restaurant, looked a little sad when I stepped into the restaurant one morning. I've heard rave reviews about the teppanyaki venue, and they recently expanded it. I did walk through the buffet a few times, and typically I was on a mission of some sort. Honestly, it was usually to pick up a dessert. They usually had an employee at each entrance who would spray your hands with hand sanitizer. They also had sinks to wash your hands, but those weren't used much at all. At least they sprayed the hand sanitizer. The buffet seemed to have good options, and it looked fairly easy to get a table. Each day they would have signs indicating the buffet's dinner theme at Savor and Taste. I did get a chuckle about the country and western night instead of barbecue night. They tried. The Norwegian app is not good. It's basically just text and PDF files. You can't chat with people in your party. You can't click that you're interested in activity for the app to remind you. When I'd open the app, I may see a different day than someone else in my party. It also didn't load the cruise when we initially got on board, so we couldn't reserve show times in the app. We had to go to the box office, and it was a really long line. The app was a big miss for me, and I hope Norwegian puts resources into making it a better user experience in the app. One thing we were really looking forward to on this cruise was comedy, especially when we learned that Norwegian Encore has a comedy club called The Social. On the first day, we were told they had 16 comedy shows during the cruise, which sounded amazing. Unfortunately, it was only amazing on paper. They had 2 comedians, but unlike other cruises where they rotate comedians halfway through the cruise, this one had the same comedians the whole time. The female comedian seemed uncertain, and she repeated herself somewhat by her second show, and she repeated herself almost completely by her third show. I didn't go to her 5 other shows because I didn't want to experience that much deja vu. The male comedian did a lot of crowd work, which I like when I'm not in the front. My cabin mate wasn't into that comedian's style. I think I ended up going to 4 of the male comedian shows, and while he didn't repeat as much as the female comedian, I learned his standard phrases, and I knew when to expect his standard phrases. So I ended up going to 7 out of the 16 comedy shows offered, and was becoming more underwhelmed with each additional show. The Social, which is where the comedians performed, is a flexible space that's also used for other things like the silent disco. While they had some chairs and sofas around the outside, most of the room consisted of folding chairs and very few tables to set your drinks. I would have preferred that comedy be in a slightly larger venue with comfier chairs and more tables to set your drinks. Folding chairs and putting your drinks on the floor isn't a great comedy club vibe. Glacier Bay is a national park where you can see a few glaciers as well as wildlife on an Alaskan cruise if your itinerary includes it. It's a fairly narrow passage and there's land on both sides. The cruise ship usually spends 8 or so hours in Glacier Bay. It's a sea day with plenty of viewing opportunities. If you have and want to use binoculars, this is the best time to get them out. If you don't bring binoculars, you can buy them on board Norwegian Encore. On this cruise, the weather was problematic, as I've already mentioned, but Glacier Bay was still beautiful. On this cruise, a Glacier Bay National Park ranger came on board and narrated over the intercom during the day. You couldn't hear the park ranger if you stayed in your room, but you could hear him in public spaces. I enjoyed the narration. This was the first of the 3 cruises I've been on in Glacier Bay where a park ranger came on to narrate the day. It wasn't a continuous talk. I'd say it worked out to 5 to 10 minutes per hour. It added a lot and wasn't annoying, and I can be someone who is easily annoyed by lots of announcements over the intercom. Choir of Man is the mainstay show on Norwegian Encore. I loved it so much that I went twice. I thought it was unique that it was an all-male cast. They really made each performer's talents and each personality shine, and it had a lot of energy and a great selection of songs. And they do covers of songs from female artists as well. Icons is their newer show that uses the same cast from Choir of Man. It doesn't have a plot like Choir of Man, but it does have the big hits, and even has a cover of the Spice Girls. If you like 70s, 80s, and 90s pop and rock, you won't want to miss Icons. There was also a Beatles show in the theater one night. I'm just a tad young for the Beatles, and I only ended up recognizing 2 songs. The crowd seemed to like it though. And there was a magician/mentalist that performed 2 different shows. He was okay, but his jokes seemed to be a bit racy given that there were kids in the audience. Keep in mind that Icons and Choir of Man have 2 different nights each that they perform, so there will be 2 nights of the cruise that don't have unique experiences in the main theater. Debarking the ship was super easy. We were self-assist and kept our luggage with us. We walked down at the earliest time indicated, and we were in the first batch of people off the ship. There was facial recognition at customs in Seattle, and I think the whole debark process took 5 minutes, and most of that was walking our luggage from the ship to the facial recognition spot at the port. There were 3 things that particularly annoyed me about this cruise. One is specific to Alaska, and that is that the cruise ship terminals and docking times that Norwegian has in Ketchikan and Juneau. Now, I've been to Ketchikan 3 other times, so it wasn't as big of a deal to me. In Ketchikan, the ship started letting passengers off at 7 a.m., and it departed Ketchikan at 1:15. That's already a relatively short window of a little over 6 hours in port. But here's the real story. Unlike all the other cruise lines to Alaska that dock in downtown Ketchikan, Norwegian docks at Ward Cove, which is a 7-mile drive to Ketchikan. So when you get off the ship, you have to take transportation to downtown Ketchikan. The logistics of getting thousands of people off the ship and onto shuttle buses in a timely fashion is laughable. People with mobility challenges were told they couldn't take their scooters onto the shuttle bus. Unless you booked an excursion that picked you up at Ward Cove, you were at the mercy of the shuttle bus situation. It took me 45 minutes to get to downtown Ketchikan between the wait for the shuttle bus and the drive there. They do have an old mill where you can do your shopping and wait inside for the shuttle bus, but it was still very much a pain in the butt. Now here's the even worse problem. If you want to take the shuttle bus back to the ship, we were told we had to be in line by 11 a.m. in downtown Ketchikan. All aboard was 12:45. So we basically got to downtown Ketchikan at 8 a.m. and we had to be in line to get back by 11 a.m. That's 3 hours actually in Ketchikan. It was pouring rain that day, and I've been there several times. So it was fine for me. But if you actually want to spend time in Ketchikan, you're not going to be able to if you use Norwegian. I would really suggest that if you go with Norwegian, definitely book an excursion that picks you up at Ward Cove so you're not at the mercy of the shuttle buses. The salt in the wound for our Ketchikan experience is that we lined up for the shuttle bus in downtown Ketchikan, back to our ship, right in front of the Princess ship that was docked there that day, making us wish we had taken Princess cruises instead. In comparison to Ketchikan, Juneau was a little bit better. Norwegian still had a less than desirable docking situation, and there were still shuttle buses, but at least they docked about half a mile from downtown Juneau instead of the 7 miles away in Ketchikan. So in Juneau, I opted to walk instead of taking the shuttle bus. If you consider the shuttle bus waiting time, the walking time was probably comparable to how long it would have taken for the shuttle bus to get to downtown. The second thing that annoyed me about Norwegian is their Cruise Next program. I went to the desk wanting a flyer that showed how their program worked as far as future cruise credits and such. What I got was this convoluted mess. I kept it for you as evidence of the chicken scratch I got. How is there not a flyer? If you can't put it on a flyer, I have no faith in your program. So no, I didn't enroll in Cruise Next because I felt like I was getting into this multi-level marketing scam based on what they gave me. My third thing is more of a minor annoyance. I ended up with some refunds. It was for port fees, and then our excursion shortened, and we got a 15% refund. My cabin mate read somewhere that the refund had to be made in person. That made no sense to me, as they have my credit card on file. It is so much easier to put the refund back on my credit card. But as a rule follower, I went to guest services and they told me I had to get the refund in cash. It ended up being $80 some in cash, which the employee had to get from 3 different drawers. It makes no sense why you have to go in person, and I wonder if I would have lost the money if I didn't go get it in person. The total cost for this Norwegian Encore cruise was $2,800 for a balcony cabin for 2 people with more at sea, which includes the alcohol package, and 150 Wi-Fi minutes per person. This also includes gratuities and port fees, but does not include excursion costs. This works out to $200 per person per day, which is a little higher than I want to pay, but it's Alaska and I didn't have any other travel costs. All in all, I thought it was a decent price to try Norwegian. If you found this video useful in any way, please like and subscribe. Thanks.